So the NFL and NFLPA reached a settlement on Deshaun Watson, and there was talk that there would be a settlement, even though the NFL held all the cards. Looks like they wanted to avoid some kind of lawsuit here, but the punishment that has been agreed to, reportedly, not signed just yet, is 11 games. Deshaun Watson will be suspended and a $5 million fine.
So this is the part that confuses me, because as I understood it, the collective bargaining agreement says it goes to arbitration, and if Goodell doesn't agree with what the arbitrator comes with, he can then either make a ruling on his own or appoint someone else to investigate and make a new ruling. Why do they need to settle? How would the Players Association even have the ability to sue?
Well, I think that I've read speculation that the NFLPA would sue to create like a stance on it, that they don't believe that this should be how punishments are doled out. And I read, like, Michael McCann writes about these sort of things from like a legal perspective. And he wrote earlier today that he didn't think that the NFLPA would even win a lawsuit, but that this would be the route they would go if it happened, to kind of make their case that they're not okay with players being held to a different standard than owners. And that's been their line throughout the entire summer, with Dan Snyder being investigated for toxic workplace and Robert Kraft being, investigated a couple years ago for inappropriate behavior, that they thought that this was unfair and something that they would be willing to take to federal court if Deshaun Watson did get suspended for the full season.
But you also have to remember the report from the arbitrator in which she was basically saying, guilty, guilty, guilty. However, based off of NFL precedent, we can't go that much further. And that's a very compelling argument, I would imagine, in front of, if you sue the NFL, say, hey, we agreed to this process. This woman was neutrally appointed by the both of us. She came to this conclusion, and then now you're making up the rules as you go along. And so I do think the NFL was in at least somewhat of a position to be like, all right, we'll get more, but let's settle, because we don't want to have that challenge to where you're going back to where the suspension was initially, and obviously that doesn't look good for anybody.
On the surface, though, they did damn near double the suspension. It was a 6-game suspension. He is now suspended 11 games, which is a massive chunk of one's NFL season. If this came down and was the same percentage in the NBA, it would seem
2/3 of the season.
Yeah, it would seem like a really punitive punishment. I think where I stand on Deshaun Watson, and I think that there's a discussion to be had. Just like banning, it would be fair, but I still think that the problem of the Browns feeling okay with all of this still doesn't sit well with me.
It's kind of weird that the first game where he's eligible is at Houston.
Yeah, I think that's like really weird optics. The first game back is week 13 at Houston, which is...
Yeah, did they consult like TV partners?
Yeah, like that's the whole thing. Because I also had read that settlement talks earlier, 12 games was kind of the talking point. It was going to be 12 games or a full season, it sounded like. And now it's 11. So it's a game earlier than that, and it's at Houston. And so it sets up a storyline that I think is kind of inevitable and gross, and I don't want to be complicit in that. Like I hate that that's even going to be talked about now.
Yeah. Do you think we see Deshaun Watson this year? I mean, there's a chance now. There's Jacoby Brissett. You don't know what happens with Garoppolo. Like 11 games, like the Browns season may be settled by then.
But if you look at the areas around the schedule, I mean, I guess in some ways you can form a narrative around any of these, right? Like, so...
Well, not like Houston is...
I understand, but like I think like the cynics, just in terms of, oh, you're looking for TV. They play the Bills 2 weeks before. It's the AFC favorites. The week before it's...
No, but it's Houston, Woody. That's his old team.
No, I understand, but like... I remember
if he came back against the Bucks, I don't think anyone would be like,
I would have done that with anybody.
It's Browns against Brady,
yeah.
Right? Like the next game is against the Bengals, the in-state rival who went to the Super Bowl. Like I do feel like there was always, I understand what you're saying, Jess, which is like this seems like the most egregious of the narratives, but I feel like there was always going to be cynicism in terms of like unless they picked like the Carolina Panthers.
I hear you, but the thing is that this is the city in which he was allegedly doing all of these things.
Well, a lot of them, not all of them, but many of them. But Jess, let me ask you this question. If let's say you're part of this committee, the NFL committee, and say, hey, we want to get him for the max amount of games. And the answer is 11, but with 11, he's got to play Houston in the first week back. Or we can knock it down to 10 to avoid that. But now it's not as punitive.
I mean, the NFL they're the people that are making these demands, right? Like,
here's the only insight that I think we have into these negotiations. The NFL was prepared to suspend him for an entire year. We had heard that. And last week came the report that Deshaun was willing to accept 8 games and a fine, which was all public leveraging, but it was very weird for that to come out publicly. I'm not really sure what the move there was, but now they've landed on 11. And did the NFL get this right?
So this is according to USA Today, that the agreement overrides the jointly appointed disciplinary officer Sue L. Robinson's August 1st ruling that Watson should serve a 6-game suspension. However, the settlement obviously falls well short of that year-long ban that the NFL had asked Robinson to level. The 11-game ban exceeds all prior league punishments for violations of the personal conduct policy. They use the word, however, 8 times in this one sentence. But yeah, so
I feel like the NFL, though, because I didn't answer your question very well, they could have easily set the line at 12 if they didn't want to be accused of like doing something that's made for TV ratings and lowered the fine or whatever.
But I guess that's my point is I'm assuming 11 was the most they could get out of them in a negotiation.
Well, who has the leverage here, I guess? How badly do they want to avoid any sort of like threat of a lawsuit? It seems to me like the NFL has more leverage than Deshaun Watson.
And they did, which is why you're seeing this $5 million fine, which surpasses his salary by a great deal for this upcoming season. We do have a statement from Deshaun Watson that was just put out via the Browns. I'm grateful that the disciplinary process has ended and extremely appreciative for the tremendous support I received throughout my short time with the Browns organization. I apologize once again for any pain this situation has caused. That's carefully worded.
Passive voice.
Yeah.
The situation caused the pain, not me.
PR.
I take accountability for the decisions I made. Again,
PR.
Decisions, not what he actually did. My focus going forward is on working to become the best version of myself on and off the field and supporting my teammates however possible while I am away from the team. I'm excited about what the future holds for me in Cleveland.
Let me ask you guys a question I asked David Sampson in the local hour today, the question that I asked Howard Bryant on Meadowlarkers, which also came out today. This, again, constitutes the longest ban as a result of a violation of the personal conduct policy. Between this, what's happened with Daniel Snyder, what's happened with the race norming settlement, none of this seems to take any momentum off the NFL as a money-making venture.
Nothing stops the NFL.
What is going to do it? Is there a saturation point? Is there a point where
the thing that almost did was the confluence of events where you had the Kaepernick discussion becoming super politicized and the game not being as good to watch, and the NFL got to work on both things, and now the ratings are back where they were. That was that was when you could actually look like, okay, maybe the bubble burst to a degree, and it got as big as it ever was going to be.
It was a hiccup.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I mean,
if you
yes,
look at
the numbers
like
went down.
A normal chart.
Yeah, it's like in the grand scheme of things, when you zoom out, it's like this is part of the cyclical nature of the sport and the popularity of the sport.
It's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, and I think to your point, I mean, like if someone was going to disavow their interest in the NFL, it would have been somebody like Mike who made a decision about not wanting to support this particular team, and perhaps other people might have made the decision to not support this particular sport that condones this behavior. But you decided, I'll go be a free agent. I'll go watch other games.
Yeah.
I'm
still going to support the league.
Yeah. You guys want to know my honest to God take on that? Anyone who says, I'm not going to do this anymore, most of those people are people who were never doing it to begin with.
Yeah.
They're giving up something. Like, I remember I had a buddy who gave up, what did he give up for Lent? He gave up, like, I'm giving up tequila for Lent. I was like, but you never drink tequila. Like, I do sometimes.
No, bring on the bourbon.
Right? Like, yeah, exactly. But he kept drinking. I'm like, well, that's not really.
Well, we saw that a bunch with conservative politicians throughout.
I'm never watching an NFL game again. I'm never watching. And, like, you guys weren't watching anyway.
Yeah.
You're just saying things because it sounds like a very strong take.
I do want to walk it back, though. Historically, we do know that lengthy work stoppages, do stop the momentum of leagues. To a degree, baseball hasn't dug itself out of what happened in '94. The NHL has had a very difficult time bouncing back from 2 work stoppages. So if the league goes away and we figure out what else to do with our lives, then maybe that's a situation where it's hard to recover from. But I just never see a work stoppage wiping away an entire season. People have way too much to gain, and careers are so short in that league that you can't effectively hold out the way that other unions can.
And the union membership is so big compared to other unions, right? There's so many guys who are in the NFLPA.
And it's hard to make big money in that league.
And most of them don't make money that lasts them beyond like their playing career.
Like my playing career is going to span 8 months. Why are you, I'm not gonna hold the line when you're ruining what little chance I have
because of a franchise tag.
Yeah,
like it's
but I do ask again. This is certainly better. This is feeling more right in terms of a punitive measure.
Let me ask this then to the entire room: had this been the original ruling, had Sue L. Robinson came out and said 11 games?
That's interesting.
How would we have felt? And would we have demanded that Roger Goodell go through the process that he just went through right now? Go and appeal it and then settle?
When has there ever been an investigation that came back and definitively told you someone sexually assaulted multiple women? And then you're like, okay, well, you can't play for this many. Like, it just seems like such a crazy process for me that I have such a difficult time wrapping my brain around that. Like, everyone learning that Deshaun Watson did indeed do what he was accused in these hearings of doing to these victims, and then them still trying to craft an okay punishment, whereas almost any other workplace in America, you're like, that person's done. See ya.
Well,
right. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, the only if you're actually disgusted by this, the only thing that satisfies is a lifetime ban. Right? Like, everything else feels trivial, right? A game, right? A game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, that doesn't feel punitive. I understand it's his livelihood and money and the results of the team, but really, what is a game? What is 6 versus 11 versus 15 versus a year versus 2 years? You either for it or against it. I understand that in the world of collective bargaining, it is simply not reasonable to say that someone should be banned for life, but that's if you are actually disgusted and don't want to see this person play football again and think of what the appropriate punishment is, there is no amount of games that feels right.
That's where I wanted to push back on Mike, who said any other job. No, any other job that's not union-based, because look at how hard it is to get police officers who are basically, for all intents and purposes, like, no, that guy killed someone. It's hard to get them out of here because the union makes it hard to.
I mean, the MLB has a very powerful union, and they did this to one of their players. The Haslams, Dee and Jimmy, have put out a joint statement in which they mentioned that they are committed to investing in programs in Northeast Ohio, so trying to hit a better tone than they hit the last time, but then they once again go to some of the older tropes that we've seen. Since Deshaun has entered our building, he's been an outstanding member of our organization and shown true dedication to working on himself, both on and off the field. Weird, because when he spoke to the media previously, he had no regrets.
Right.
He said that he didn't have anything to work on. We will continue to support him as he focuses on earning the trust of our community. Again, you were okay from the jump.
Right.
You were okay from the jump with what he did because you just learned definitively he did it, and you're like, well, since he's been in our building, we've come to find that he's a good man, and he's really putting in the work that he said he didn't have to put in a couple of months ago. It's just that the more I talk about it, the more I get upset and emotional.
They're gonna say, Mike, you understand? They're gonna say the things that both try to demonstrate contrition, and I'm using air quotes for those not watching on YouTube, but also at the same time, they're not going to throw their guy. He's their guy. They're not going to throw him under the bus completely. They're trying to walk a line of saying, hey, our bad or whatever, but also we support you and we think you're going to be great.
Now their third attempt at speaking publicly on the record.
It's also like they chose this guy. He wasn't like on the team, and they're defending him and supporting something that they invested in a few years ago. Like they
went out and got that guy.
Went out and got him.
You bet your bottom dollar. Like they were okay with this months ago.
The action.
They talked about this like as callously as you could when they decided to give up what they gave up for this player and give into financial demands that we've never seen at that position.
The actions speak way louder than any press release. But to me, analyzing the press release is an exercise in just trying to bash your head against the wall because
right. But I do think that their last couple of statements, like when they use triggered and all that, like I think it was worthy of it. This one is certainly like they've had enough time to plan for this one. It's certainly the best of the statements. But again, all of this just feels so stupid, guys. Like me grading statements and me trying to figure out how many football games this person should play.
I agree with that. But I do think calling out like a publicly prepared statement and being like, this is full of it, like that's fine. That's kind of our jobs. Like you're able to disseminate, what lies are being fed by these people. But I do think the point is important that like equating games in a suspension to lives that were harmed is kind of an impossible task. And I don't know how anyone puts a number on the amount of harm that's been done here.
Right. It's so unprecedented because of the sheer volume of victims.
Even if there's one victim, though, like I don't know how you say like this crime equals this punishment.
No, I understand,
but
I do think, and this is like my sensibilities here, I am more willing to buy in on the concept that Deshaun has learned from this and is putting the work in and realizes his actions, as he puts it, his decisions were so traumatic and illegal. Like if he did that once, I am far more willing to extend the benefit of, okay, you get a second chance. You do your time, you serve your punishment, you learn, you get involved in the community, and there's a path for you to earning trust. I think Michael Vick actually got extended that over a lot of time, and there's certainly some people that will never forgive Michael Vick. I'm not making
jail.
No, I understand, but like just because you escaped,
I think the thing,
like punitive measures in the state of Texas, where it's notoriously difficult to prosecute.
Yeah, Michael Vick did go to jail, and he did do the work. It seemed like publicly to.
Right, but when you're talking about 25, 30, when you're talking about like more than one, it's just like what is happening?
The difference is like this is sexual violence. These are a lot of women who aren't, who want to stay anonymous, who don't want to be public facing, and I don't know what they want. Like remembering that like the victims, there are victims. Like I don't know what makes them heal. I don't know if anything does.
I think the difference is when you compare those two cases. What happened with Michael Vick? Obviously, animal cruelty is terrible and everything, but there's something very real that I don't think a lot of people in this country didn't get, which was Michael Vick grew up in an environment where this wasn't looked at as anything but what it was, right?
Yeah, a lot of people hold on to the product of my environment.
But it's not product of environment. Like, oh man, I still get in trouble because I hang out with the guys from the block. Like, legitimately did not know that dogfighting is wrong.
Well,
right?
For me, the biggest thing is time, and Michael Vick certainly put in the work.
But
put in the time.
I'm building to my point, right? So, what Deshaun Watson was doing is something that is universally accepted as, that ain't cool.
Except in my mentions, apparently.
And then number two, we're not talking about one or two cases. When you're talking about 24, 30, whatever, we're talking about systematic sexual predatory behavior, right? So, Mike, even when you say, hey, he could have, if he had been contrite and shown like he's ready to do the work, I submit to you, someone who has that many counts, that's not, there's no work, man. Like, this is someone who's got a thing going.
We are presently recording this as Deshaun Watson is speaking to the media. And Deshaun Watson has just told reporters that he will continue to stand on his innocence and says that he never assaulted or disrespected anyone. All right. That's a wrap.